3. The Call to Chaos from Atom to Atom by way of the Jornada del Muerto. James Shelby Downard. Mystagogy. The United States, which long has been called a melting pot, should more descriptively be called a witch's cauldron, wherein the hierarchy of the grand architect of the universe arranges for ritualistic crimes and psychopolitical psychodramas to be performed in accordance with a master plan. The ritual crimes are principally oriented to sex and death, in the cultists' homage to their zany notions of the universal spirit that created the world, and also as a rite of passage employed to catapult the human race into the much trumpeted New Age, known as the Novus Ordo Seclorum to the Freemasons who devised this country and its currency. Grand Architect of the Universe, JO2, is cult lingo for the aforementioned universal spirit, the creator of all. Important in the hierarchy of these New Age rites are the call to chaos and the killing of the king ceremonials. Both embody the use of the scapegoat. The concept of transference to a scapegoat is the most important among the superstitious manipulations just behind the scenes of the New Age sham scam. The death of human scapegoats, gr pharmacos, is a symbolic catharsis of a supposed type of pollution which are described as the perverse or negative phase of the two basic life forces, the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer HaTov. This theological dualism holds that there are two antagonistic forces, male and female, which became one. Though the Yetzer HaTov influence is deemed to be good and the Yetzer Hara is said to be bad, there exist no absolutes or value judgments in Scottish Rite Masonry, whose dogma contends that equilibrium is the harmony that results from the analogy of contraries. When the balance of the opposed influences becomes upset, they are equalized by transference rituals and sex death rites which uses human scapegoats. The existence of the hierarchy's secret combination that wields an invisible government, was possibly first made known in the United States by the Mormon Church many years ago when the group avowedly opposed Freemasonry, but nothing much came of these disclosures made over the years by a few well-informed and brave people. The secret combination is dominated to a great extent by Freemasonry, which is also termed speculative Masonry, and progenitor of a number of variant organizations, such as Scottish Rite Masonry, York Rite, Grand Orient, and others. These organizations are similar up to a point. The first 3 degrees of initiatory ceremony are essentially the same, and all the brethren are thought to be bound by a so-called mystic tie. The mystic tie is a mysterious influence that is said by Masons to link men of all religions and of the most discordant opinions, uniting them into a brotherhood. This tie wends its way around many societies, secret and otherwise, clubs, labor unions, churches, armed forces, police forces, and government bureaus. Even the familiar necktie is a cryptic offshoot of this same brethren of the mystic tie. So zap? You may be a Mason, even if you don't know it. Masons describe their influence as a sacred and inviolable bond that gives an altar to men of all religions. That altar, stained with semen and blood, is the repository for Masonic fertility and death and resurrection rituals, just as in the old mystery religions. You won't find the occult sciences of Freemasonry in any college catalogs, though its concepts permeated the adepts of the Royal Society, who presided over the birth of formal science in 17th century England. The elite style of inquiry and praxis called the science of symbolism is preserved deep within the heart of Freemasonry even today. But, quick as an imagined wink of the old all-seeing eye, this symbol psi can become blackest sorcery, as we will see. XKKK*K. When science became involved with sorcery and symbolism, the three made for a mystical ménage à trois. The linking of cosmic male, Yesod, and female, Makuth, is the magic principle behind the Kabbalah, the major metaphysical tradition behind the great work of alchemy. In alchemy, the universal power that permeates everything is composed of two opposite principles, that are by way of a cosmic marriage made one. The result of this quasi-sexual encounter, matter, prima materia, was created, and it in turn manifested a vital force, vis vita. From this matter and energy, Adam Kadmon, Hebrew for primordial Adam, or first man, emerged, embodying the cosmic masculine and feminine powers. Adam K was an androgyne, a bi-guy or AC/DC type who, according to the myth, was unhappy with his bisexual makeup, and so threw out the female part and thus became all male in preparation for creation of the universe. As they say, a hard man is good to find. Next, according to the myth, the powers, Sephiroth, by which God is alleged to manifest himself, or herself, on earth, shone from his eyes, breaking the bottle, pressure vessel, designed to receive the mighty light whammy of the Sephiroth. So Adam, the reformed faggot, is held to be the head honcho of creation, and the golem of God. Such antique anthropomorphism can be modernized somewhat. The idea of a universe composed of competing masculine and feminine powers, can be explained in electrical terms. As a result of the union between the polar male, positive, protonic, and female, negative, electronic, primordial matter, hydrogen atoms, maybe, was produced. The separation of the male and female components of primordial matter can perhaps be thought of as a divorce, and a return of the two to their pre-creational, chaos-inhabiting single state. The infinitesimal quantity of primordial matter is called an atom. The formula of the parity between primordial matter and primordial energy is written. Can be written in the Einsteinian equation E equals mc2. Just a new label on an old bottle, seems to me. Well now, the JO2 gang, on that fine summer day in 1945, with the help of their scientific sorcerers' apprentices, fissionated atoms and thus broke up the sacred marriage at the basis of creation, and in so doing violated their own supreme law of the universe, upsetting the equilibrium apple cart of the cosmos. Alchemy has a very important place in Masonic dogma. Sex magic is very much a component of that belief, albeit with certain changes in terminology. For example, the object of the masculine and feminine powers of the universe is symbolized by the Nagari, an androgynous dragon which figured prominently in alchemical transmutation efforts. Surprisingly, some alchemists, in their attempted metallic conversions, were actually trying to divorce the cosmic she and he, but without knowing what they were doing or recognizing the inherent danger. It remained for the scientific adepts of the current era to finally accomplish the dire task. In his Ordinal of Alchemy, Thomas Norton, an important 15th century alchemist of Bristol, England, writes, "This art must ever secret be, the cause whereof is this, as ye may see, if one evil man had thereof all his will. All Christian peace he might easily spill, and with his pride he might pull down rightful kings and princes of renown." This is all very reminiscent of the Masonic precept, "There is in nature one most potent force, by means whereof a single man, who could possess himself of it, and would know how to direct it, could revolutionize and change the face of the world." During the Renaissance, from the 14th through 16th centuries, people known as humanists discovered arcane truths in the Greek and Roman myths and mystery religions, as well as in the occult sciences of astrology, Hermeticism, and Kabbalism. Convinced that the key to all these enigmas lay in Egyptian hieroglyphs not yet translated, the humanists began a long-running effort to reconcile the ancient faiths with Christianity to create a universal religion that would sell worldwide. The fundamental concept of this universal religion was the postulate that all forms of existence emanate from the same universal power, and they all consequently seek a mystical reunion with that power. Alongside went the magical or theurgic Masonic belief that enlightened persons, Illuminati, can communicate with the powerhouse and by so doing, gain control of the hidden forces of nature. It may be meaningful that certain Freemasons once called themselves Illuminati, and the name was so used on their macaronic Latin diplomas to signify such a wired-in hotshot. This wasn't going to be any free lunch, of course. There was to be a priesthood or bureaucracy involved, and the priests were to have all the esoteric theurgic goodies, the amount in accordance with the individual's degree. XKKK*K nowadays, we have folks calling themselves secular humanists who appear to be retreading universal religion in New Age format. That endeavor has major backing from the secret sector, and other individuals manipulated by the JO2 Mafia. They haven't let the secret out yet, though, that the New Age was not entered as planned and that tomorrow might even have been cancelled. You see, according to an age-old prophecy, cosmic fire, or ekpurosis in the original Greek, is gonna nix all tomorrows. The forecast was made by Heraclitus, c. 535 to 475 BC, the weeping philosopher, and boy, wouldn't he have a crying jag nowadays. However, even if tomorrow does come, with most mortals having been brought together and made one, without individuality in their togetherness, they'll function as parts of cybernetic mind control system. Others, whose wills haven't been completely reamed out, will be confined and regulated in workplaces with digitalized biotelemetry implants. Saker Blue. If such a fantastically hideous situation is the alternative, wouldn't the cosmic fire option be preferable, so we could at least go out in a blaze of glory? One wonders. XKKK*K. Consider that the secret society which became the nucleus of the Office of Strategic Services Central Intelligence Agency Octopus was making biotelemetry implants in unsuspecting people as early as 1933. After the operations, the victims were kept drugged for a time and then were brainwashed. OSSCIA is written that way because when the former became the latter, they changed the name but not the facts. Believe the implants were at first activated by touching the skin with a device similar to an electronic prod, but which actually was a symbolical phallus. The early implants were made to stimulate the pudendal nerve, when triggered, so that the sexually excited and amnesiac drugged victims could be used in the sex circuses of the OSSCIA secret order. Those victims were not infrequently operated on while anesthetized by morphine and scopolamine, which produce analgesia and amnesia, twilight sleep, to esotericists. They too were brainwashed after healing. This evil program, supposedly for the sake of national security, was oriented to the cult of JO2. XKKK*K. The practice of Masonry, which revolves entirely around the science of symbolism, involves signs, emblems, words, and their origins, meanings and manipulation. It is largely an outgrowth of gematria, the Kabbalistic numeration of Hebrew letters and the supposed magical meanings of those Turkey tracts. Gematria is considered applicable to other languages, and indeed may have originated with the Greeks. Montague Summers points out in Witchcraft and Black Magic, it is mere waste of time and hair-splitting to attempt to draw minute and cavilling distinctions, to chop up words and quibble and subdivide, to argue that technically and etymologically a sorcerer differs from a witch from a necromancer, a necromancer from a Satanist. In actual fact and practice all these names are correlative, in use synonymous. Of paramount importance in all of this thaumaturgy is the mystical toponymy of the geography of witchcraft. The land of enchantment. New Mexico, for instance, is a maze of such loaded names, words, signs, and symbols attached to certain key places in an esoteric but logical order. That isn't confusing to those who know the science of symbolism and can adroitly make their way through the labyrinth. For example, there is the Jornada del Muerto, Journey of the Dead Man, which runs north to south, and El Camino del Diablo, Devil's Highway, running east to west. They meet just north of the site of the first atomic bomb blast. The Jornada del Muerto may be likened to the peregrination or long journey of the alchemists, and that voyage links up with the all-important killing of the king procedure of alchemy. New Mexico's Jornada begins at El Paso, Texas, although its original starting point was at Teotihuacan, Mexico, according to an old book in the Mexico City Library. Believe, however, the literary reference designated another Jornada del Muerto which was supposed to lead from a sacrificial altar at the Teotihuacan temple site to the land of the Bat God, a major deity in Mex mythology that may be roughly equated with the devil. The America Jornada begins, however, in an unlikely spot, a run-down old neighborhood of El Paso called Kern Place, near Crazy Cat Mountain. Peter Kern was a turn-of-the-century Mason given to consorting with greaser brujos, witches, of various types but especially those involved in necromancy. There came a time when Kern started dressing in white robes and he went to Alaska after the gold rush and started preaching to the Indians there. He eventually took a groups of them back to El Paso and, along with some Mexican Toltecs, Kern built a huge ceremonial gate at the entrance to his Kern Place housing development. The structure was a nightmare of esoteric symbolism, which apparently was supposed to represent the gate with 1,000 doors, otherwise known as the Gate of Death. The Angel of Death is said to be Lord of the Gates. There was much to interest this angel at Kern's Gate, positioned at the head of the journey of death. XKKKK Il Trinity. A few miles up the Jornada del Muerto, in Mesilla, New Mexico, their Kern Gate on the Jornada del Muerto is the Masonic Lodge Jornada No. 70. It was 70 days during which a corpse had to remain, soaking in natron, native soda, in one of the houses of death of ancient Egypt, in order to become a proper mummy. Natron is found along the Jornada del Muerto, and particularly around the Trinity site, where, just as in the Trona area near California's Death Valley, the mineral is said to have resulted from evaporation of prehistoric inland seas. Trona, of course, is an anagram of natron. Trinity is the name of the spot where the world's first atomic device was exploded, on July 16, 1945. Conventionally, the process is known as nuclear fission, a splitting of plutonium or uranium atoms to liberate vast energy, but that's too mechanistic and limited an explanation, especially in view of the total picture of world hanky-panky and crypto-ritualism we've been able to assemble since then. We're taking a different tack and looking upon the event as a bust-up of the sacred marriage, hieros gamos to the Greeks, of twin cosmic reality principles that formed primordial matter, a divorce that liberates primordial energy much like the rolling pins, dishes, and profanity flying out the door behind a fleeing hubby in more conventional marital blowouts. Well, ask you, what more symbolical place could have been found for such a transaction than this Jornada, with all of its link ups to the alchemical long journey and king-killing rites? Icing the cake is that Devil's Highway, US 380, which clips the northwest corner of White Sands Missile Range, some 40 miles from Trinity. Moreover, the town of Hondo is the Devil's Highway, and it would be well to note that jinn are reputed to hang out in Hondos. Some Japanese believe that a fox jinni stays in a Hondo in a temple in Japan, much of the time. It's an amazingly small world, isn't it? The jinn are big in Mohammed's Quran, and readily identifiable as Tellurian spirits, which are said to have been created by the same events that produced Adam Kadmon, for they too were born of chaos, although some allege that all of the jinn were in the bottle that was broken by the might light, Sephiroth, shining from Adam's eyes. They thus were released from the bottle and so are said to be eternal pals of old Adam. It generally is contended by Kabbalists that the jinn make their home with Adam K, which is sensible for, being incorporeal, they take up no room to speak of, and am sure that as many as want to can sit on the head of a pin, should that ever become necessary. Adam Kadmon's cosmic history, then, has much to do with bottles, and so has that of the jinn. In fact, there are so many stories that hinge on some jinni being in a bottle that it might be said that bottles are an occupational hazard of the jinn. You can't believe much of anything about those old jinn stories, though, doggone it, about as much as one can believe that a mighty light, Sephiroth, shone from Adam's eyes and busted the bottle that has such an important place in Kabbalah cosmogony. Quite frankly, am inclined to suspect that, if he did break that blasted bottle, it was because he got his yezid caught in the neck and had to crack it to get it back out. Little boys sometimes have the same trouble with pop bottles, so some things never change, guess. XKKK*K. In April 1945, a gigantic steel bottle said to have weighed more than 440,000 pounds and have been feet long by 12 feet in diameter, arrived on the railroad siding at a town called Belen in Tierra del Encanto, Land of Enchantment, New Mexico. After the bottle stayed in Berlin for about 2 months, it was taken on the railroad to Pope, which is nearer the Trinity site, and then was loaded onto a special 64-wheel trailer by way of what is called by project historians a Beckett hitch, and then was towed by 4 powerful tractors to Trinity. A good question would be, did the workers take Holy Communion at Pope, or maybe at Trinity? Incidentally, Thomas Becket, 1118 to 1170, an Archbishop of Canterbury, became an opponent of the then king and began defending special privileges of Catholic priests in England. He was assassinated in the Canterbury Cathedral, and his death is often alleged to have been a peculiar one, possibly even ritualistic, and hence loosely associated with a king-killing scenario. Scientists explain that the Trinity bottle was a pressure vessel designed to contain a partial chain reaction of the atomic device in the event that nuclear fission of uranium-235 was not sufficient to produce a true atomic explosion. For reasons never convincingly explained, the Trinity bottle was never so used during the actual blast, which took place 800 feet away at ground zero atop a 100-foot steel tower. We are given to understand, then, that despite a vast commitment of time and expense, fantastically expensive custom fabrication in an Ohio steel mill, arduous transportation to Tierra del Encanto over a circuitous rail route that had tracks strong enough to carry it, and, finally, laborious inch-by-inch removal to the Trinity site and suspension above ground from a gigantic block and tackle, the bottle was left idle, as the official Los Alamos laboratory. History laconically puts it. In April 1946, bombs were finally detonated inside the huge bottle, and holes were said to have been blown in its ends. In 1947, the bottle was buried. In 1951, it was disinterred, tested, and reburied. The curious, one might say mystical, history of the giant bottle came to an end when it was finally uncovered in the late 50s, dusted off, and put on display, minus its rounded ends, at the Trinity site. One of the major components of the Kabbalah is an explanation of how the universe was created. Apparently there was a pulling back, Zimzum, by God of his divine substance, Ein Sof, from a little area where our world now stands, like an immensely corpulent man sucking in his gut in order to get his pants on. God then directed a ray of light into this vacant space, rather like our lard bucket letting fly a stream of urine, and this formed the first man, Adam Kadmon, whom we've already met. Adam, as we know, had the peculiar habit of projecting light rays from his forehead and eyes, of 10 differing types relating to the 10 spheres or sephiroth that were to make up all created things. These lights fell into vessels, perhaps like chamber pots in the form of our fatso, but so powerful were Adam's headlights that the vessels assigned to the upper 3 sephiroth managed to contain the light that flowed into them, but the light struck the 6 sephiroth from Hes to Yesod all at once, and so was too strong to be held by the individual vessels. One after another they broke, the pieces scattering and falling. Nothing, neither the lights nor the vessels, remained in its proper place, and this development called after a phrase borrowed from the Idraat of the Zohar, the death of the primordial kings was nothing less than a cosmic catastrophe. In the words of crackerjack Kabbalist Gershom Scholem, writing in the Encyclopaedia Judaica, this sort of confabulation maunders on through thousands of cobwebby pages in hundreds of old Kabbalistic tomes, and we'll spare ourselves further details with one observation, or rather, question, but vas you dare, Charlie, so often asked by the skeptic in the old Baron Munchausen radio show. In attempting to account for the atomic gang's bizarre doings with Jumbo, we must look into the sort of symbolism, precisely because the inner circles in these Masonic states of America are so addicted to the wacko stuff, as can be seen on any dollar bill. Possible scenario: the blasting of the mason jar with the nearby A-bomb flash, the nearest man-made thing to the primordial light of the Sephiroth, followed by its later dismantling, may have been a dramatic reenactment of the original Kabbalist creation myth. Freemasonry is chock full of such theatrical instant replay exercises. The tie-in of the death of the primordial kings in Skolom's last sentence will have to await our discussion of another mighty psychodrama pulled off by the cryptocracy at a different Trinity site 18 years later. Another possibility in understanding the Big Jug derives from the arena of alchemy, where mysterious doings with bottles are depicted in so many old engravings. These generally are believed to center on the creation of a magical mannequin or homunculus, thought to have superhuman magical powers, and usually described as forming inside a bottle or vessel of some kind. Jewish mysticism posits a similar Frankensteinian monstrosity called the golem, and this would be a suggestive link with alchemical lore. While much of Masonic lore is composed of Hermetic, alchemical, and Jewish elements, much of Jewish mysticism is of Egyptian, Babylonian, and Gnostic origin. The interrelations of such esoterica are easily recognized, and their hidden meanings are not really enigmatic after you have become acquainted with the inner doctrines of Masonry, alchemy, and the Kabbalah. For example, the ritualistic breaking of bottles is intensely magical. The rabbi's bottle breaking, Shavira, routine pertains to Hebrew cosmogony and the primordial atom, symbolically shattering the jug that was the instrument of creation, designed to receive the might light of the cosmic masculine-feminine principles, Sephiroth, which shone from Adam Kadmon's eyes. However, when the light did shine, it did not contain the feminine principle, according to the myth, so the bottle was broken because of the imbalance. Consequently, the jinn that were in the bottle with Adam were released, resulting in the earth being demonized, at least if we can believe Mohammed in his Quran. The Shavira rite is also associated with the croaking of the primordial kings of Edom, Genesis 36, because of another imbalance of the masculine and feminine principles. Rabbi mystics also perform a ritual called Tikkun to restore the busted Sephiroth bottle and get the powers of evil back inside. In an October 1987 television news broadcast, reporting on Soviet-American arms talks, the principal topics were missiles and nuclear warheads. In his summary, the commentator remarked, "They are trying to return the nuclear genie to its bottle. Alas, it can't be done. It's too late. Too late. Too late. The damn bottle has been cracked up for keeps." For Signrigism, alchemical jargon and grimoires make for a mystical hazy maze of signs, symbols, and words which have been subject to bewilderingly different interpretations and interpolations, and consequently are almost indecipherable today. Most self-respecting scholarly types won't touch it, meaning that they implicitly reject the whole thing as meaningless. Dr. Gustav Jung was not quite that obtuse, but nevertheless spun his wheels trying to analyze alchemy, or more precisely, its surviving books and documents, strictly from the vantage point of subconscious psychologizing. His assumption seemed to be that all of those puffers had nothing better to do over many centuries than to sketch out puzzling diagrams and cryptic writings for the puzzlement of psychoanalysts. In the alchemical amalgam there are virgins who aren't really virgins, the Jyotu can apparently restore lost maidenheads, bottles, baths, scapegoats, marriages, unicorns, dragons, bisexual unions, serpents, Ethiopians, crosses, crucifixions, deaths, resurrections, you name it, and in the maze too there is a monstrous thing somewhere near the heart of it, which when perceived should have been left alone. Alchemy synergizes concepts of the ancient Egyptian religion, along with Jewish and Jewish-oriented Christian mysticism. The king-killing aspect of this rigmarole is symbolized by a serpent crucified on a Tau cross, the serpent representing the cosmic male-female union. The unified masculine and feminine powers in contention is symbolized by a two-headed androgyne. Their separation is effected by the death of the Tau cross serpent. Some have identified the snake as the cosmic reptile known as Ouroboros, which was given to putting its tail in its mouth in the way its folkloric descendants, called hoop snakes, supposedly do. So there we are, the crucified serpent symbolizes the king in the alchemical killing of the king rite. But wait, we're not out of the woods yet. The crucified snake, or king, also symbolizes a deity who is the son of the king. After the killing of the king, which betokens the breakup of the sacred marriage and destruction of primordial matter, the primordial power, cosmic fire or ekpurosis, must be saved, and for that to be done the son must first be devoured by the king, father, prima materia, first matter. No one knows what might happen if the son devoured the father, though that does seem rather a big oversight. Nevertheless, the proto-hyle, prima materia, first matter, of the alchemists does seem quite similar to the universal spirit or world spirit of Plato, c. 427 to 347 BC, and the Pythagoreans. It appears that those Pythagoreans and Kabbalists, alchemists, what have you, never really determined which came first, the son or the father, or which was which, for that matter. The whole thing is very much like trying to settle which came first, Nikekur, the chaos goose or great cackler, the cosmic egg, Sut. In ancient Egyptian religion, everything began in chaos, after which order was established, an egg emerged, and the chaos goose hatched it. So which came first, and which is which? It does keep you guessing. That egg and goose yarn is just a part of one version of the first act of creation in ancient Egyptian cosmogony. Another is that the egg is the sun and from it emerged the god Ra, the sun god, who, once again, embodied primeval male and female powers of generation, from which all forms of existence emanated. Ra was said to have come to earth in a tripartite form, embodying the deities Osiris, Isis, Horus, in a pyramid called the Benben stone. This was kept in a temple at Anu, Heliopolis, for ages. In the Egyptian religion, the Osiris-Horus trinity was symbolized by a right-angled triangle. Osiris, the male principle, was the base, Isis, the female, was the perpendicular, and Horus, their son, or product of male and female principles, was the hypotenuse. Pythagoras, during his stay in Egypt, scouted out the mystic geometric secret of right triangles, to which his name is still attached. The sum of the squares of the two shorter sides is equal to the square of the longest side, hypotenuse. The fertility geometry of the right triangle formula is expressed by the idea that the product of Osiris and Isis is Horus. That formula and the right triangle have a large place in the third degree of Freemasonry. The Kabbalistic/alchemical/Masonic cosmogony posits that order as well as supernatural beings are born in chaos, along with it the reciprocal idea that someday everything will return to chaos. Some, like Heraclitus the Weeper, even contended that the return would be by way of cosmic fire. Surely it must be clear by now that when you destroy primordial matter, or prima materia, atoms, what you will, you get back primordial energy, or cosmic fire, for which thermonuclear energy seems a close enough approximation. XKKK*K. The term synregism denotes an interaction between the universal spirit and the human mind or will, which are alleged by all good Masons to cooperate. The universal spirit reputedly reacts like a transponder dispensing good and bad things when actuated by symbolic supplications and rituals. While the Masonic semantic maze is bewildering to those who must rely entirely on dictionaries and other guidebooks, it's no problem to those with knowledge of S.O.S. and don't mean something unmentionable on a shingle, but the science of symbolism. An illustration: in the land of enchantment, on the Jornada del Muerto's Trinity site, there is a small pyramid. The area around it is fenced and called Ground Zero. So what? You might say. Well, there's a hamburger stand called Ground Zero at the Pentagon, and consider the term to be highly appropriate for both Pentagon and Trinity sites. Zero is a symbol of naught, nothing, non-existence, zip, the big bagel. Zero also is the numeral assigned to the Fool card of the tarot, and it here signifies termination, like card 13, the Death card. That certainly would be the net effect, for those on the receiving end of any of the doomsday devices first tested at Trinity and still today deployed by the Pentagonians. The pyramid at Trinity Ground Zero might esoterically be considered symbolical of the Benben pyramid of Heliopolis, in which Ra of Egyptian Trinity came to earth, but just between you and me and the gatepost of the ground zero fence, don't believe that that pyramid will restore a bit of order to the confusion resulting from the atomic divorce of the sacred marriage. As for the pentagon's 0 point, a pentagon is defined as a plane 5-sided figure with 5 inner angles. More interestingly, it is the third figure from the exterior in the camp of the sublime princes of the royal secret, or 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite, according to Scottish Rite sources. So, the pentagon clearly carries with it a secret symbolical overload, and isn't it interesting that the same man who oversaw design and construction of that odds-heap building, Army engineer Leslie R. Groves, next took command of the entire Manhattan Project, which was to build the bomb and test site at Trinity. Whether General Groves was a member of the Sojourners, career military, or another Masonic lodge hasn't been revealed to the profane. XKKK*K with the universal power being principally oriented to fertility and death, it's clear how important sexual and sacrificial rites are to these zanies. Ancient Phrygian priests wore caps during their sacrificial rites, of a type now called Phrygian caps, and damned if such goofy lids which look a bit like the old U.S. Army CT caps of World War II aren't still worn by some of our petty bourgeois babbit buffoons who identify with those priests of a zillion years ago. The Phrygian cap is said to be a sign of the enlightened, Illuminati, and it is also, would you believe, a symbol of circumcision. Sex magic rites can involve circumcisions and castration all the way to outright orgies. They are traceable to belief in that AC/DC universal spirit. There is a $20 word for this notion. Such a creature is called an androgyne or hermaphrodite. There is an actual medical abnormality of this type, of course, and can still remember the morphidities that used to be shown in dirty tents at the old county fairs across Middle America. The one I saw looked like an overweight woman with a fake beard and what seemed like part of a chicken drumstick poking out of her groin above the female sex. It's hard to believe that such pathetic specimens are revered by the so illuminated pubbas even today, but they are, so help me Jesus. Satanalian orgies were and are performed with some representation of a deity, as in certain of the sex circuses arranged by a secret society of the JO2 orientation that became the OSS, and later the CIA. A woman called the Great Whore performed in those rites some years ago, representing such deities as Artemis, Diana or Hecate, Aphrodite porn, Dirty Venus, Bastet, Selkut, and the White Goddess described by Robert Graves in his famous book. Do believe that these sex circuses were part of a greater call to chaos working, but as yet I've seen no sign that a clear call ever got through to the JO2 Big Daddy, which, just possibly, didn't like her style. That chaos call girl was what some spooks call a double agent, but that is not a fully descriptive term for a true four-way gal. She was a bisexual, a nymphomaniac and a witch of a type known as a carnal magnet, Magnus Carnus. She was put into a state of magnetic estrus, to perform perverted acts with all comers, in rites intended to conjure up a theurgic influence of occult forces of elemental nature. Theurgic masonry is a system of magic practiced by those who seek to communicate with and influence supernatural beings. The mental state of those who believe they do so communicate is in spitting distance of Illuminism as defined in Dorland's Medical Dictionary, a state marked by delusions of communication with supernatural beings. There are supposed to be different ways to communicate with supernaturals, but since ancient times, sex rites have been a major method to attain such purposes. Theurgic masonry is a systematic religion that resembles La Secchia Religione, the old religion, witchcraft, as well as Oriental Tantrism. Chaos-related doings, Saturnalias, are burlesqued in carnival observances in Italy, France, Spain, and other Catholic lands. Saturnalia vestiges are seen in the famed Mardi Gras, where there is even a lord of misrule who presides for a time when the carnival license to deviate from decent moral conduct is declared. Some might object that such shindigs are all in fun anyway, and refuse to recognize any darker motives at work. Who cares if some of the carryings on are rooted in ancient superstitions, and so what if the king of carnival presides as a thinly disguised Saturnalia tyrant? Unhappily, there is no lack of evidence that drunkenness, confusion, disorder, and lust have been fomented as a prophylaxis for cosmic chaos. Far worse, the ringmasters also have arranged for ritualistic murders of certain highly specialized victims, for sex and death are the alpha and omega of their voodoo. King kill the third degree of blue, basic, Freemasonry, and more particularly the ninth degree of Scottish Rite work, embody symbolical assassination and death ritual, but in JO2 operations they go in for the real McCoy, heavy snuff stuff. In the Hiram Abiff allegory of the third degree ritual, Hiram, alleged architect of the ancient Temple of Solomon at Jerusalem, is assassinated by three unworthy craftsmen, Jubala, Jubalo, Jubalam. The assassins are tracked to the cave Banakar by three Elus, elected ones, who pursued the assassins to punish them. Offhand, on the basis of that lore, you would not be surprised to read that, in standard Masonic sources, that caverns represent the darkness of ignorance and crime, impenetrable to the light of truth. But don't be too sure, the cavern also can be a symbol of the grave in which the light of truth originates. That's right, a grave is a place to look for light and truth. Surely everyone knows that. Caves have more than one meaning, like medieval palimpsest parchments, as does almost everything in science of symbolism circles, including even ritual assassinations. Consider the notorious abduction and murder of Captain William Morgan, a so-called Cowan, or outsider, who dared to reveal hush-hush Masonic matters, and of whom the only thing left is a memorial statue in Batavia, New York. Ritual assassination can be for punishment of the victim and warning to others, as in Morgan's case, or for more recondite reasons, as in the granddaddy of them all, the formidable and horrific killing of the king. The most recent such sacred immolation of a king, not exactly Charlemagne but the best available at the time, took place November 22, 1963, at the Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Ponder now the bang, 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 at Dealey and the following aspects of the very unique demise of one John F. Kennedy, the United States' first and only Roman Catholic president. A building at the corner of Dealey Plaza was the home and trading post in the early 1800s of John Neely Bryan, who, as worshipful master, symbolized King Solomon in that humble log cabin lodge. That building is long gone now, and in its place stands an open city square marked off by four unusual stone arcades at the corners. Before President Kennedy came to the Dealey Crypto Temple, he was traveling a sort of Jornada del Muerto of his own. On November 21 he visited the Temple House site, the Rice Hotel, esoterically known by Texas insiders as Temple Houston. The Rice was on the site of the first capital of the Republic of Texas, a place strongly associated with Masonry, since a lodge allegedly met in the Capitol Hotel, or in the state Capitol, which occupied the same site. Sam Houston, the big drunk of the Cherokees, lived in the Capitol Hotel for a time, as did his son, Temple. Remember, the Alamo is a shibboleth learned almost in the cradle by all good Texans, but the real facts of that engagement and its aftermath aren't so glowing, as admitted by one Roger Conger, in Texas Grand Lodge magazine, April 1956. After the 1836 Battle of San Jacinto, the captured Mex Generalissimo, Santa Anna, met Houston with a handclasp reputed to have been that of a Mason, and filled the air with Masonic distress signs, and well he might have, as many Texans demanded his life without formalities. But Sam had other fish to fry, sending Santa Anna to a place of safety under a guard which included 5 Masons, and later was freed. No Nuremberg trial here, despite the Mexicans' culpability for the atrocities. At the Alamo and at Goliad, where hundreds of Texans had been executed. Robert L. Duncan, in his biography of another great Mason, General Albert Pike, recounts stranger things of Houston, such as the occasion, in 1827, when he peeled off all his duds and threw them in a fire was a sacrifice to Bacchus. By far the most sinister individual to come out of the Texas woodwork, however, was the mysterious Colonel Edward Mandelhouse, another Houstonian who went on to become the wire pooler's controller of President Wilson and whose pedigree for clandestine manipulating of our history before, during, and after World War must be read to be half believed. The sacrificial king killing at Dealey Plaza was a symbolic reenactment of the murder of Hiram Abiff, traditional architect of the original Temple of Solomon, by the three assassins or unworthy craftsmen whom we've already encountered at the Cave Banakar. Fantastically enough, 3 hobos were arrested at Dealey Plaza immediately after the Big Bang, and suspiciously close to the famed grassy knoll and railroad yard, which is where most advanced assassination researchers place the actual firing squad who blew Kennedy's brains out. A famous news photo shows the bedraggled threesome being marched along by Dallas police. Some researchers have had interesting things to say about that photo. First, that one of the 3 resembles the enigmatic E. Howard Hunt, then a high CIA honcho, and second, that one of the hobos appears to be wearing an earphone, as if for a two-way radio. Naturally, Super Spook Hunt denies categorically any involvement in the Dealey affair, and in fact the 3 hobos, whoever they were, somehow got sprung loose immediately by the Dallas Police Department, and then promptly disappeared from the stage of history. What are of interest to us, however, would be the purely emblematic aspects. The hobos are playing the symbolic roles of Jubilo, Jubila, Jubilam. Lee Harvey Oswald, of course, is the officially approved triggerman. His name, and its diminutive of Oz, means divine power, such as Jo2 represents. 3 pillars are said to be supports of Masonry and the Lodge. Those columns are called, Dabar Wisdom Oz Strength Gomer Beauty Hot Diggity Dog. But one question, could this be the reason why a dog was depicted on certain old Masonic diplomas? Who knows, but if they had portrayed Sirius, the dog star, on their sheepskins, it would have been more to the point, for it was Sirius that reputedly led the 3 Elus to the cave to round up those ancient hobos. The name Kennedy, in Gaelic, Senadiak, is said to mean ugly head, which might just also connote wounded head, might it? Kennedy's head was blown away near an oak tree in Dealey Plaza, and the Kennedy plant badge back in Ara is an oak. More of what Dr. Jung liked to call synchronicities, no doubt. But now here is where the guiding hand moves far beyond compulsive coincidences and into the realm of truly awesome emblematic metaphor. Dealey Plaza is in an area that once overlooked and often was flooded by the Trinity River, and hence it occupies, yes, a Trinity site. That other Trinity, on the Jornada del Muerto, was where primordial matter was first destroyed, with cosmic fire resulting, for an instant, anyway. This Trinity angle, then, clearly has a thaumaturgic semantic tie of some kind that is particularly compelling, in view of the private Jornada that Kennedy had traveled prior to his immolation. 83.